Plants vs. Zombies is without a doubt the most popular tower defense game franchise in history. Thanks to how easy it is to start playing any of the games, how fun they are, and their unique sense of humor. Now, for some reason, many people wanted me to cover this game, explaining how the plants work. I would like to remind these people that logic is not the strong suit of Plants vs. Zombies. A game in which we use nuts with eyes that could win the Guinness record with their size to stop hordes of zombies, but the truth is that I found it quite an interesting topic because of many things that I will explain below. So, today we will talk about how the plants in this video game work. First, we have to know where they came from. Initially, the game developer implemented plants because they were stationary, and zombies because they were slow. And this gave him a solid basis for a new tower defense game. Thus began the concept for our beloved video game, and it is obvious that they did not think of a strong logic behind it. We can see this even more with the supposed story that Plants vs. Zombies has, which is too inconsistent to have any firm logic to it. For starters, in the comics, which I didn't know existed before researching for this video, it's Crazy Dave who creates all the plants in his lab. And we see that the plants are nothing more than different species modified by him. Recall that Crazy Dave is the gentleman with the pot on his head who teaches us the mechanics in the Plants vs. Zombies games. In these games, this background is very strange, and not much is explained. In the first game, we had seed packets branded by a company known as Bloom and Doom Corporation. Thus, this company would be the one that would have created the plants, and they would still be a product of human beings. The thing is that the second game passes all that by the buttocks, and with the introduction of time travel, we are shown plants and zombies fighting in prehistoric times before the existence of humans. Leaving aside that it is very rare that plants existed in a less evolved version, we have zombies before the existence of the human species. This seems to suggest that plants and zombies are rather distinct species coexisting with humanity, and with subsequent games, this seems to be the case. In Garden Warfare, we see Rose, a plant that comes from the past. And we also have a poster showing that Dr. Zombos, the main antagonist, and Crazy Dave competed together at a science fair. Beyond all this, the official guide to protecting your brain, a Plants vs. Zombies book, tells us that the government was the one that created the zombies unintentionally. So here we have a clear case of a constant inconsistency. What happened, evidently, is that in the first game they had intended for the plants to be created by Dave and the zombies to be ordinary zombies, but for the second game they put in time travel. And to make it entertaining, they invented all those crazy things I just told you about. Then, if we can't trust the games, what do we trust? Well, the vast majority of the plants are based on real plants, and surprisingly there are several real plants that share the abilities of the plants in the video game. So we will rely solely on nature. I also clarify that we will be based on the plants from Plants vs. Zombies I and II. Because Garden Warfare gives us plants that can move from one place to another, and one of the characteristics of absolutely all the plants that exist is that they cannot stand up and run away. So we'll ignore that part, because it simply can't be explained without taking away the meaning of the name Plants vs. Zombies. Basically, we're going to focus on explaining how each plant would work in the real world without getting into, for example, how the hell do they have eyes? Or why in game descriptions many seem to have professions and entire lives beyond Plants vs. Zombies. So let's start with the most important plant, the main plant, and one of the most interesting in this video game, which is the pea spear. This has a lot of variants in Plants vs. Zombies I and II, such as the repeater, the peas freezer, Plants vs. Zombies 2-pot, and all the variants that each of these has. All these plants are based on a single species, the Pisum sativum. This is a plant that is cultivated to obtain its small seeds known as peas. The problem is that the pea plants don't shoot their peas, and in fact don't even resemble the version seen in the video game. But this does not mean that there are no plants that shoot their seeds. One of the characteristics of the pea plant is that it gives peas in pods, and something quite curious is that there are some plants that shoot their seeds from pods. The clearest example I found is this video, made by Biodiversity Shorts. Here we can see a plant that is believed to be a silk tree or some similar species. It shoots its seeds quite a long distance, at a speed of about 30 km per hour. This mechanism is activated by the heat of the sun, which melts the resin inside the sheath, and the tension released shoots the seed several meters away. This method is repeated by different plants with varying degrees of effectiveness. There are several orchid trees that have large pods that can shoot their seeds about 50 feet. And Mexican petunia can shoot its seeds at a short distance. We also have some cebas with the same mechanism. And finally, several violets and their relatives. And although this method looks quite suitable for today's topic, I have a better option to defend yourself from zombies using plants, although I don't recommend you try it. The devil's pickle, also known as the bitter gherkin, shoots its poisonous pickle-like fruit at a speed of almost 100 km per hour, using the water pressure inside to reach such impressive speeds. So it seems that the most plausible scenario is that the pea shooters do not actually throw peas, and use a method very similar to that used by the devil's pickle. But in Plants vs Zombies we also have mushrooms. And they don't shoot seeds or fruits, they shoot spores. This is based on the already known fact that fungi reproduce by releasing their spores in nature. You can say that they shoot them, but nothing like what we saw in Plants vs Zombies. The only fungi that shoot spores at a high speed are extremely small, and a clear example are the pilobules, fungi that grow in the poop of herbivorous animals and shoot their spores at about 30 km per hour. To achieve shooting spores at that speed, but on a large scale, you would need to modify a fungus genetically so that the spores shoot out of a specific section of the fungus in a controlled manner, something we simply don't have in nature. But one thing we do have in nature is exploding mushrooms of sorts. Gasteroid mushrooms, better known as puffballs, produce their spores internally, and do not release them like many other mushrooms, but keep them inside until they are opened by someone else, dry out and fracture, or, in very specific cases, explode. It is normal for them to fracture or for someone to step on them, but the explosion is not violent at all. The plant counterpart to the explosive mushrooms in Plants vs Zombies. We see them in potato mine, cherry bomb, and the jalapeno. In real life, none of these plants explode, so initially it seems a bit difficult to make sense of this. Overlooking the fact that they most likely only carry explosives on the inside, as is evident with the potato with eyes. We can find some plants that explode in nature. There are several that are a more extreme version of the one used by plants that shoot their seeds from their pods. We have, for example, the touch-me-nuts or impatiens, which explode violently when you touch the pods where they keep their seeds. The Hurricrepitans tree, known as Indian bean, javilo or yellow kapok, has fruits that explode very violently, which sounds similar to those of a gunshot, and some even call it nature's grenade. In addition to this, and some species of plants whose pods explode in a manner similar to the touch-me-nuts, we have my favorite example, the exploding cucumber. This is very different from the devil's pickle, as it is not shot but explodes violently, and unlike the gherkin, it is edible. These explode when ripe to disperse their seeds and is the closest thing we have to an anti-personnel explosive in the plant kingdom, beyond the fruit of the yellow kapok. Another curious plant in Plants vs Zombies is the cactus, which returns in Plants vs Zombies 2 with several buddies that also shoot spines. In reality, there are no cacti that shoot thorns, or at least this has not been formally acknowledged. I have found stories and anecdotes on the internet of cacti that spontaneously shoot their spines, specifically targeting no-pulse or flat cacti, when some are saying that they use it as a defense mechanism against animals or even other plants. This is only a legend, but I found so many stories and mentions that I thought it was quite interesting to mention it. The next plant on the list is the scavenger plant, which is clearly based on the Venus flytrap, one of the most well-known carnivorous plants in popular culture. Insects are attracted to the traps in its leaves by the bright color and nectar secreted by the plant. Venus flytrap has hairs that, upon contact with an insect, cause the leaf to close at an incredible speed. The teeth are set to prevent the prey from escaping, and if the prey is large, the plant has to close its trap tightly before it begins to digest it. Once it is closed, digestion begins, which almost always takes 7 to 10 days. Interestingly, a trap only performs this process 3 to 4 times. After that, photosynthesis will simply take place. In my opinion, these are all the categories of plants that we can cover in a realistic environment. We have absurd plants, like the grapefruit in Plants vs. Zombies 2, which shoots plasma. The infinite nut, which needs no explanation really. We have plants that are nothing more than a catapult. And among many others, we have the mimic, a mime potato that can mimic any other plant. We have plants that shoot fire, ones that shoot ice, ones that fly, and a plant called a cat's tail, which is nothing more than the face of a cat with a beanie that shoots thorns with its tail. The point is, even if we can explain some of them, most of them just don't make sense, at least not in the real world. But, in the game, oddly enough, they don't. Not necessarily. One thing I found very curious is that, although it is fairly consistent, they seem to have a somewhat consistent story for the plant powers. The description of the intensive carrot tells us that she uses vitamins and sorcery to revive fallen plants. The description of the hazel witch tells us that she uses magic spells to transform zombies into mushrooms. And the description of the plantain tells us that she absorbs darkness and excretes light, and uses dark forces and sorcery powers. Sure, looking at it from the outside, it's obviously an easy explanation for something that defies logic, but we have plenty of evidence that in fact, all plants have a magical origin. All plants have a magical origin. In Garden Warfare we see Rose, a sorceress who comes from the past, and in Dark Ages, zombies use magic. It is a fact that magic exists in this universe. And in the character descriptions, it is treated as something else. It's not normal, no, but it is a known and available force in this universe. So strangely, it seems that the occult is the answer to today's question. So, I hope you liked this video. Like it if you did and subscribe for more videos like it. Oh, and remember that saying a wizard did it is valid, as long as you have enough evidence. Goodbye.